Hello, welcome to Success with Sabrina podcast. Today we have on the show two very special guests. Now, I met Dustin a while back while we were in our mutual friend's house in Tampa, Florida. Now, Dustin, you have together with you today your wife, Sabrina. Please tell us a little bit about you and what you do.
All right, perfect. Well, thanks for having me and my beautiful wife. Yeah, as you said, my name is Dustin. Um, I've written some books on self help, just been through a lot of experiences and wanted to share that with others. And so I started writing when I was still in high school and just kept doing that and turned around and put those into books so that others had the same opportunities that I had, but not going through the stuff to get there. And then from there, I moved into coaching, helping others, taking things that I've learned and teaching that to other people so they can have the same outcomes as I had.
And can you introduce us to your wife also? I know she's also a coach.
Mhm. Yes, this is my wife Sabrina. It's kind of weird being on here with two different Sabrinas, so if it gets confusing, be patient. um,
Yeah.
so yeah, this is my wife Sabrina. She's a coach. Want to give some
Yeah,
insight?
so I am a certified quickening coach, and I've been coaching for quite a few years now. And it all really began about 14 some odd years ago, where I was on my own self exploration journey and how to heal some past traumas and childhood stuff. And on the way I finally found a semblance of freedom and was like, I am now on a mission to make sure other people get that same experience of just being completely free of their childhood junk that many people go through, and then we're just expected to be like normal adults. But the reality is there's a lot of people not having normal childhoods to enter adulthood into. So I'm kind of
Mhm.
like the post care after the trauma. So
Very cool. Now, Dustin, I met you at Roger's house, like I mentioned before, in Tampa, and I knew that you were flying in from Utah. And
Mhm.
when we connected again recently, you're like, "Yeah, I'm in New Zealand." So how does that even fit into the picture? I'm curious.
So how does New Zealand fit in? So it's been something we've been working toward. My wife's actually a dual citizen, and I mean, how we got here, she could probably better explain that than me.
yeah, so it's goes back to manifesting those miracles. This has been one of the miracles that we've wanted to manifest in our life for at least 3 years, and taking steps along the way. And then all of a sudden COVID happened, and I we were told by, basically the best way to explain it was our higher up, our higher power, if you want to get to New Zealand, you must leave now. And all of a sudden, everything that we'd been working on completely aligned. And within 3 days, we packed up our house. Uh, 30 pieces of luggage, drove down on a 15-hour trip to Arizona, threw stuff in storage, and then took what we could carry with us. It was really felt like we were on the wings of angels at different points, because it was like, what is happening? This is real. There's layers of magic that happened. And
Mhm.
so here we are in New Zealand at home.
Yes.
Very
And
cool.
we just feel so fortunate and blessed. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it definitely was a blessing because originally when it came about, um, I came home from work and Sabrina says, "Hey, we're going to New Zealand." I'm like, "Okay, what's the plan?" And she's like, "We're leaving on Sunday, and here it is Wednesday." And I'm like,
Hmm.
"Okay." I was running a store, and I was like, "Well, I can't just up and go. I've got to, put in some time, make some adjustments and uh, have,
2 week notice at least.
yeah, 2 week notice." And so she was gonna. I said, "Nope, you can go ahead, go with the kids and stuff like that. Do the initial, which would be quite difficult because 5 children on a plane for almost 24 hours is
Which
a
I have
lot."
done.
Yes,
Thank
she
you.
has done. She has done. We came down here for
In September.
vacation. Yeah, and says, "Well, I need to, have some closure on a couple of things, get things lined out." And then
And I basically was like, no, if you don't come now, I've been told you will not be able to make it because they're closing the borders. And he's like, how do you know that? I was
Right.
like, I just know.
Wow, that's
And
so crazy.
next,
Look at that. Yeah, it's
it's
amazing, really.
beautiful.
Yes.
And
All
the
the
next moment,
manifestations
oh,
of our
sorry.
lives, right? No, I'm talking about all the manifestations of our lives, really, because
Yeah.
it's about
Mhm.
listening, right? And being
Yep.
Right.
present, and and we've talked before on this podcast when I had this interview with Susan Dane Seton, and I asked her about divine intervention, and she said,
Mhm.
something that really brought home to me, which was that we wonder why it doesn't happen even more often, right? But the truth is,
Mhm.
it's not that it's not happening as often, but how present
Mhm.
are we, right? So that we can
Exactly.
manifest
Absolutely.
it even more often in our lives. Now,
Right.
Dustin, I've heard some of your work, and you talk about that, about becoming vulnerable. And why is becoming
Mhm.
vulnerable such an important part of the work and in becoming who you want to be?
Becoming vulnerable, it's, the word itself is, you're opening yourself up. You want to get yourself as raw as you can so that you can go in a direction. You could either, get vulnerable, open yourself up, and go into depression. And I've been there, I've done that, and it's not a fun place to be. And the other direction is to move up or move forward. And so by getting vulnerable, you move all the stuff out of the way. You really find out what's most important, and from there you can make a direction or choose a direction and go there. It's kind of like a butterfly, when it's first coming out of the cocoon. It's, you can help it out of there, but it'll never fly. The process helps it strengthen its wings so it can fly. And so getting vulnerable, you're being that butterfly, you're strengthening your wings so you can to fly.
Hmm.
So
Yes. Now, you've written over 1,000 inspirational quotes. Which one is your
mhm.
favorite one?
Which one's my favorite? I had to pull out my book for that one because I yeah, that one. I had it bookmarked and then set it down.
Um,
Huh. Yeah. Oh, here it is. Okay. So it's a really deep one, and again, this goes back to the being vulnerable. When I too was going through some stuff, I went pretty deep, and in the process, I came up with this quote, and it's shovel upon the mound of sand. I slum myself to the depth of no return. Before I take my last solemn breath, the sun creeps upon the morrow. Its crimson rays break these chains of doubt, and I rise to go a little farther.
Hmm.
And for that, the reason why that one is my favorite of all the ones that I have is just because, going deep, getting to the core of what the problem is, sometimes it's hard. You could hit a depression, you could, lose direction and lose sight of where you want to be or where you want to go. And you just have to keep pushing yourself. It's sometimes we dig our own hole and we get stuck in it.
Yeah,
And
it gets messy
but no
sometimes.
matter what, you can push. It does, yes.
Yeah, yeah.
And if you just keep pushing forward, you'll come out and you'll realize, okay, I'm where I'm supposed to be and continue the direction you're meant to.
Hmm. Hmm. And why this fascination with board games? I know you've created a few board games. What does it mean? Because most of our audience is entrepreneurs, right? Now, we
Mhm.
look at the entrepreneur as a whole and the overall health of the entrepreneur, right? Because building a business, since there isn't, let's say, a path that is, step by step in what to do or what to follow. And we're kind of like entering uncharted territory in a way. When you're going, um, in business for yourself, you're really getting out of comfort zones and really exploring, right? But I've always
Mhm.
said to most of my clients that your business grows in proportion to what you grow, right? And that
Mhm.
is directly proportional. So the more you grow, the more your business is going to grow. And
mm,
what does it mean to you creating these board games and business. What is the correlation there between board games and business?
Uh, I mean, their focus is life lessons, and yeah, everybody can get a mentor, get a coach, have a business partner, and stuff like that. But it's all work, no play. And by creating the board games, you bring fun into it, and so you can take your mind off of all the work, but at the same time, you're still learning something and growing. And it's just, yeah, it's really about fun while learning.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes. Now, you've created the PAR system, and it is a gift. And what is that the PAR system that you created is as a gift to entrepreneurs today?
So the PAR system, what it is I'm a big fan of acronyms, so I've got them all over the place. So what the PAR is P for proficiency, A for alignment, and R for refinement. And the big thing in that is most people try to get proficient on the things that they know and don't focus on the things they know less about. And so with the PAR system, it's really making proficient the things that you're not very good at, and the refinement is refining the things that you are good at to get yourself better at them, so they, in a sense, take care of themselves. And then the alignment is, again, all work, no play. You need to have a strong support system, and that support system is family and friends. And so you have to have a good balance between work and a personal life. And so the alignment is getting those to support each other. You give enough time to your family, then they'll allow you the time you need to do what you need to with your business, and then give your business enough time that it allows you that freedom with family.
Mm-hmm. Now, Sabrina, in the beginning of this podcast interview, you talked about how a lot of us experience childhood, and it's not necessarily the healthiest kind of childhood, and then we're expected to just get up and go, right? But we catch ourselves working a lot on healing, right? And so you talk about healing in your work, and I believe that some people wait to feel completely healed before they do business. What would you say to these people?
So my answer is for everyone really that is on a healing journey, but specifically for business owners, there is no such thing as destination healed. You're not going to get to this place and be like, I have arrived. It's literally like you are on a journey. It's a process, an unfolding and an undoing, and then a redesigning of who you are. So yeah, if you're waiting to accomplish and manifest like this business for you to get to this place of healed, you're going to be waiting a really long time. You got to do it and follow, actually the actual doing includes healing with it. So you going after your business and dreams and all of that creates more healing, more freedom for you.
I love that. I love that. What now? Also, as part of your bio, you talk about being a food zone practitioner. Like, what does that mean? What is that?
Yeah. So have you heard of reflexology?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Where you can, yep. So it's basically there's different parts of the body that are reflected in the feet. And by working with the feet and doing certain techniques, I'm able to specifically target different areas of the mind. It's actually mind, body, and spirit that are out of alignment and then realign them. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It
Mm-hmm.
was really cool because one time while she was in school for it, she was working on our oldest son's foot, and she's like, "Oh, does such and such tooth hurt?" And he's like, "Yeah,
I
how
could
did
tell him
you?"
exactly which tooth. And he was like, yeah.
Yeah, like, how did you even know? Because he hadn't been complaining about
Mhm.
his teeth or anything like that, and she knew.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was just really cool. And then even one time I was like having a lot of stomach pains and stuff like that, and um,
Yeah.
she went in and started working on my intestines and stuff like that. And I'll tell you what, I definitely had a lot of spent time in the restroom because it definitely
Moved.
it moved some stuff.
Yeah, it's been around for forever. But yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear you talk about this because it reminds me of when I had my second child, and the midwife came to visit me after I've given birth,
Mm,
and she was asking how we were doing, and my husband started talking about how much he was experiencing a lot of pain in his back and lower back, and I looked at
mm.
him and I said, Excuse me, like I was the one that just gave birth, and you're you know but it's funny because then she said, well, let me work on your foot, and she did a some type of like healing work on his foot. And I remember my dad walking in the room and being like, there's something wrong with this picture, and he was coming from the same standpoint of like, shouldn't you
There
be working on her?
there there is a thing considered surrogate pain, especially
Yes.
when husbands wives,
Yeah.
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 Especially when they're
Or yeah.
present at birth, right? And they
Yep.
watch you, right, go through all of that pain for sure. Yeah,
Yep.
so we got to learn about that later, but it was just a funny experience. Yes.
That's cute.
Um, yeah, so in your work, Sabrina, you also talk about mental health, and
Mm,
how can we nowadays, especially with everything that's going on right now, right, protect our mental health?
mm. So, mental health to me is when one knows your own mind and then how to navigate it and then have emotional intelligence. And the way to protect, especially as a business owner, is having a daily routine in place where you are consciously choosing to connect with your subconscious mind and then address any emotions and move them. Just kind of sitting there and reacting to things is what builds upon an unhealthy emotional aspect. Whereas if you're consciously connecting and responding, so you're responsive versus reactive, you're going to have a much easier time in different, let's say, the worst case scenarios, chaos and the whole world shut down. You'll be able to respond versus react.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. We've talked a lot about on this podcast about choosing to participate in the collective consciousness right now, which is based on
Mm-hmm.
fear and
Mm-hmm.
or making a decision to go the other way, right? So while everyone is zigging, you're going to be zagging, and that takes a lot of willpower and not so much of a reactive way of being, but more of a causative way of being.
Yes,
Yeah.
correct.
So I
Yeah.
love that. Yeah. Now you've also talked about decluttering, but I wasn't sure if you meant like declutter the house. Like, what were you talking about?
So I actually mean all of it. So I also used to be a home alignment specialist. So I would go into people's homes and I would support them in decluttering their space and then realigning it, because our home is direct reflection of what's going on with us mentally and emotionally. And so I didn't just go in and like clean a home. I was like decluttering deep inside their subconscious and their psyche, and then it would reflect outward into their home. So decluttering means just releasing and relieving yourself of the baggage that you don't even remember, but it's definitely running your life, and the stuff that you are aware of but you're not sure how to get rid of.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
yeah.
because if you just get rid of the stuff that's collected
Hmm.
and you don't work through it, then you're just going to find new things to fill those spaces.
Hmm.
Like one client had a table that was literally stacked to the ceiling. The stuff was touching the ceiling. That's how high it was. And had she just gone in and just, hey, I'm a housekeeper, clean up your house, they would have found something new to put back on the table versus using the table for what it's meant for. And so, working with her, processing through it, she was able to declutter the space, find a home for the belongings, whether it's to keep it or an actual home in the house. And she was able to keep the table clear and,
Yeah.
and
So
use it.
let's
To
dive a
this
little
day.
bit more deep on this because I'm curious. Like, so did she have a lot of clothes or papers stacked on top of the table?
Yeah. Hmm. And
And so
actually her
both,
home
actually,
was,
it was both like clothes and paper.
it was paper,
Oh.
books, papers, boxes. I mean, just some dishes that had never been touched.
Mhm.
Um, And that was just the dining room table. Her whole home was having this. I call it the home has a heartbeat. So, we have order and chaos. You're going to have a mess happen in your home, right? Because that's what happens when we're in the living. And then you bring it back to order. It's like a heartbeat. The problem is people flatline either at complete chaos or over perfection of order. So the opposite is also a byproduct of that. So, yeah, it was throughout the whole home, and it's been really cool seeing now 5 years later. She actually connected with me recently and was like, "Hey, I just wanted you to know, like, I still have my table clean." And she sent me a picture of her room. Like, I mean, it's just really amazing to see that the emotional work that was done, because she too had had stuff, childhood trauma, and she had no control. And now the way of controlling her life was to fill her space with stuff. And it was but that I don't necessarily just work with people on their home. It is
Mhm.
definitely all the layers.
Yeah.
Yes, but in both of your work, I've come in contact with, you talk about getting real with yourself, and um, for both of you, whoever wants to answer this question, what does getting real with yourself actually mean?
Um, I would say getting real is basically just cutting out the crap stories. Quit feeding into your storyline. Most people, when they have a complaint, they draw other people in and to find support in that story. And those that don't buy into it, they usually push those people away. And those are probably the people they need to bring in more, because they don't want to hear your crap. They don't want to live in it with you. And they're probably going to help you pull yourself out of it. And so getting real is just being, to me, it's accountable,
Mhm.
100% accountable. Growing up, that was one of my biggest things. I was never accountable for my choices, my actions, and the consequences thereof. And it was going through hardship that I learned, no, everything that is done, I have to account for it, whether I did it or somebody else did it and it involved me. And that's what getting real is being 100% accountable for your choice in what's happening, and being willing to acknowledge that and move through
So, do you feel like there was actually an event that happened, like, or an aha moment in your life that you finally like, wow, I'm getting real right now?
it. Yeah, somebody asked me the other day, and it's not one that I too often share. Um, is my realization moment was when I was a teenager sitting in the back seat of a cop car, and the officer said, you can continue living the life you're living and live that path, but this is only a moment in your life. This is going to pass, and you just have to decide whether this is going to always be your outcome, or you can take the things that you're going through, learn from them, and become something more, and then turn and help other people.
Mhm.
And that was probably a big turning point for me, where I decided, okay, like, I've been through a lot of stuff, and maybe my choices at the time were just a reflection of what my life was looking like. I was being rebellious because I wasn't liking the things that I was experiencing. And so from there is where I decided to, okay, yeah, everything does have a life lesson. And that's really what the catalyst to the quotes were, is everything that happens, there's a lesson. And so I just started writing quotes. But that
Mhm.
was a huge turning point for to think, wow, like, this officer has something great to say,
Yeah,
and I
it's
can
amazing.
take it.
It's amazing because
Mhm,
we're talking about coaching today, and I
mhm,
know I don't know if you're familiar with the ultimate coach, but he is someone that has accomplished a very, I guess, successful career in the coaching industry. And once he was asked, who coaches the ultimate coach, right? And what he answered was very interesting because he said, everyone, even the postman coaches me. And I
mhm,
thought about that, how interesting that is, that obviously, there are people that dedicate their lives into the study of becoming a coach, and they do this as a profession. But until you get to that point that you are working with someone, how are you letting other people really coach you, right? And anyone
Mhm.
can coach us if we're willing, right? It's more about us
yeah,
being at that at that point that were willing to be coached.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's amazing to hear your story and talking about the police officer, because also it has to do with us becoming coaches, right? So even if you're not going to do this as a profession, how can you be a better coach to your kids? How can you be a better coach to your employees? How can you be a better coach to yourself, right? And in every profession, as a teacher, you can be an amazing coach if you learn the coaching skills. As a police officer, you can be an amazing coach and you can transform people's lives, right? So it's an interesting way to think about this profession and look at it in different ways. So I love your story. Thank you for sharing with us. Um,
Absolutely.
what are the three things that one must do, not as an action item, but more of a posture to really become who they're meant to be? So, what are these three things you would say that without it, they would never make it?
Mm, we in our family we do this thing. Uh, like we'd go see a movie or we'd go do a family event, and we'd always at the end of it, we'd ask, "Okay, what was your high? What was your low?" Or even at the end of each day, what was your high and what was your low? Versus just always focusing on the high, we wanted to know what our children's low was, so we could help them work through that. And so, for me, I use that so much is focus on the high, but you also want to figure out what the low is so you can work through it, and then just no matter what, always push forward. And so that's just something I enjoy living by, and it's been able to help our family grow together and learn what our children are going through versus just pushing aside the lows, because nobody wants to hear negativity, but it's there. And if you're not going to address it, you can't work through it. You can't see that there's something better.
See, and I've got a little more insight to add is gratitude. Honestly, an attitude of gratitude is neat. Cliche as that sounds, gets you a whole lot further than just looking at situations from that negative side. Because it's really easy to look at, say, in business, how poorly you're doing and what you need to improve, and it's like, well, okay, just start with gratitude, and then you can shift the others as well. And then there was one more, and it just left my brain.
Yes. I think that, as we're approaching the end of this podcast interview, I would love to end it with gratitude, because I think that we don't think about it enough. We don't talk about it enough. And I think that gratitude comes in very handy right now, especially with what we're experiencing right now in the world, and how there is scarcity, there's lack, and being able to remind ourselves what we're grateful for would be a one step towards continuing to create the business and life that we have envisioned, right? So, out of all the things that we talked about, is there anything else that you would like to address for us to end this?
um, hmm.
No, I'm blanking.
Yeah. Something to focus on. I just keep going back to the push forward. Find something that puts a smile on your face, and have that just kind of the ace up the sleeve kind of thing, just something on reserve. Because most people, they're happy and they're so busy being happy that they forget that there's going to be a time that they're not happy. Whether it's simple as you stubbed your toe, or losing a family or a friend or something like that. People just want to live in their happiness. And if you don't have that ace up your sleeve, something that makes you happy, and just have it on reserve when you're not happy, if you don't have that, then it's harder to get yourself out of it. We once had to do a date night challenge where we had to sit down and discuss if I had to plan your funeral. And nobody wants to talk about death, but by being able to have that conversation before it was happening, it just kind of made it easier to be prepared for the day that it's going to come eventually. And so for me, the biggest thing is just always having something. I have a playlist of music that I keep on reserve, and I listen to it when I'm happy, but also when I'm not happy, I'll put it on so that it can help me get back to what happiness looks like.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I would add that um, you're not meant to do it alone. We were
Yeah.
never meant to do this life alone. So that doesn't mean you have to have a partner, but just reaching out to friends, family. If you don't have all that, that's okay. There are people everywhere, all over the planet that are available. And
Yeah.
getting a coach, we weren't ever meant to do it alone. And I believe the best coaches have coaches because in order to
Mhm.
lead other people, we have to be coachable ourselves, which is what we were talking about earlier. But it is really vital to be open and willing to work on yourself so that way you can help other people
Yeah.
as well as your family and yourself.
Yeah. Have a support team that they can, yeah, they can help bring you back, bring you out of it and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you so much. It's been delightful to have this conversation with both of you. I am so happy, Dustin, that you brought Sabrina here today. Not because you're not cool, but the combination of the two of you just make it
Thank you so
awesome.
much for having us.
Yes.
What an honor.
Yes,
So, yeah,
thank
very
you.
Yep.
exciting.
Absolutely.
All right, you have a good rest of your evening. Yes.
You
Yes.
too.
You
Thanks,
too.
Sabrina.
Thanks, Sabrina. Bye bye.
Oh, my